Hi everyone, I'm Allison Freyberg and welcome to Lecture 5, Evaluating Sources for Credibility. Let's dive in. What are you thinking about when you're trying to evaluate sources? Do you think, hey, what's wrong with Googling until I find enough sources to back up my point? It's what I've always done. It works. It's gotten me through. What's wrong with it? Maybe you think this, hey, as long as I found it through the library, it's good, right? Makes sense. We tell you to go to the library. We tell you to use the University of Redlands library and the sources available online or databases. So it's good, right? As long as I use it. Or number 3, I want to use good sources, but I'm not sure what makes a source credible. And this is probably where most of us are. Right? We want to make sure our sources are good. We want to have credibility. We want to build credibility in our writing projects. But there's so many moving parts these days, and it's hard to tell what's credible and what's not. And it's getting harder by the day. We're used to Googling, and we're also used to using our libraries. So, how do we do this, and how do we move forward? I'll give you a few techniques that should help in that regard. The first thing we need to do, though, is identify the kinds of sources that might appear in your research analysis papers. Scholarly peer-reviewed sources. Now, you might hear this term a lot, or it might be new to you. We're going to talk about what that means, and we're going to talk about when to use them. Okay, and this is scholarly peer-reviewed sources are the kinds of sources that are produced through university researchers, and they go through a very strong editorial process, and that's what peer review is about. We're going to talk about it a little more in a second. The second type of source you might run into is an industry or trade publication or a government publication. And these are government publications are more like reports that you would see produced at the local or regional or state or national level. And then industry and trade publications are reports by specific people in certain industries for specific people in those same industries. And number 3, these are the popular sources, and these are the ones that are going to give us the most trouble. Because this is everything from current events, this is newspapers, magazines, to pretty much any website you can look at. And this is where we really have to work on evaluating the sources. Let's look a little bit more in depth, okay? Scholarly peer-reviewed sources. Now, these are the types of sources that go through a lengthy editorial process. You probably spend a year and a half writing the manuscript if you're a researcher, and then you submit it to a journal, and that journal editor decides whether or not that article has enough new knowledge or contributes to the conversation enough that it even is going to go out to readers to get feedback. And if it does do that, then it goes to 2 readers who don't know who wrote the manuscript, and the manuscript writer doesn't know who the reviewers are. That's what they call blind review. And those reviewers who are experts in the field and have multiple, usually many publications in the field, then review that manuscript to determine whether or not it's going to add to the knowledge base in the field. And they'll usually send back loads of comments, and which will probably take months to actually do a revision, if it even gets a call to revise and resubmit. Then you'd spend months revising it. Then you'd resubmit it to the same blind reviewers, and then they send back more comments. And then this goes back and forth, usually a couple of times. And if all goes well, then probably about 18 months later, that manuscript is accepted and published. So it's a very rigorous review process. Those types of sources are by definition credible. There may be disagreements, of course, because there's research conversations and debates, but the idea is that it has gone through a rigorous editorial process to create that credibility. These are usually sources with lots and lots and lots of references, and they're usually in, well, they are in peer-reviewed journals, and they're usually longer, they're usually more rigorous, right? Okay. Here's basically scholarly journals. This is from Armacost Library. They use an editorial process called peer review, which is what we just talked about. Okay, different kinds of readers. You're going to have a very specialized expert readership. This is not the kind of stuff you're going to read at an airport. Okay. This is from Armacost. They've provided a video that tells you a little bit more about scholarly sources. So that is a live link. If you request, well, if you have the PDF, you can just click on that live link and you'll be able to see the video. Industry, trade, and government publications. Now, as I said, these are for professionals in a specific industry for others in the same industry. Again, another very specialized audience. So you might have journals and trade publications called Advertising Age, Design News, Retail Week, Progressive Grocer. You're not going to read them unless you're in that industry or you're doing some serious research for your degree programs, for your academic work in those fields. Okay, so those can be very, very helpful, and you can find them under the research guides at Armacost Library. A government publication is just that. It's a document or a report that's authored by a governing body. So there's lots of different governing bodies, but it's meant to be a report that is either judicial, legislative, or executive in nature. And it'll give you just, a lot of, like, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, all sorts of reports linked to government agencies. Again, valuable resources for most academic work, and you would probably use these kinds of documents, like government documents, usually only if you are doing academic work or pretty deep research into an area. So these industry, trade, and government publications will be very helpful for you in your academic work. But here we get to the messy stuff. These popular sources are sources designed for a general audience. This is stuff you can, I want to say, stuff you can find at an airport. Just general readership. There's no specialized knowledge needed. These are newspapers and magazines, most websites. These are all considered popular sources. And these are the kinds of sources that you need to run through an evaluation process. Definitely. Okay. Armacost again has provided this video to help you learn more about popular sources, so I encourage you to have a look at that. It's only a few minutes long. So here are the three kinds of sources you're going to run into. What do you tend to rely on the most? Are you relying a lot on scholarly peer-reviewed sources? Are you relying on industry and trade and government publications? Or are you relying on popular sources? Business Insider, Forbes, Business Week, Wall Street Journal. Those are all great newspapers and magazines, but they're newspapers and magazines, and you have to run them through an evaluation process. If you are relying heavily on this category here, number 3, those popular sources, we need to really take a step back and see if we can get you to use more scholarly peer-reviewed sources and more industry and trade publications. And if you are going to use the third category here of popular sources, we need to give you some tools so you can evaluate those sources, which is what we'll do with the rest of this lecture. When should you use what type of source, right? Because every source kind of has its place. If you're going to use a scholarly peer-reviewed source, you're going to want to use them when you need the most credible research conducted by the experts in the field. And like we said, the review process is what assures that kind of relevance and accuracy. Okay. These are usually long articles that go very in depth. They're very specialized. They're usually very difficult to read. They have lots and lots of references. So you want to make sure that you're using them really, really well. You're going to want to use industry trade publications when you're trying to find information that's relevant to a specific trade that you're not going to find perhaps in scholarly peer-reviewed work, but it might just be, uh, Design Week. It might be, what the design industry is dealing with these days. What are their current events? What are their industry observations that might not go through something like this in a scholarly peer-reviewed process, but the information needs to get shared with other people in the industry. Okay, and if you need local, state, or national reports, if you need numbers, labor numbers, if you need all that kind of stuff, that kind of government report information, then you use your government documents. There still is a place to use these popular sources. You use them when you're trying to get a sense of what's capturing the general public's attention in terms of a specific topic. How's a topic being addressed? For whom? When? To what end? You're trying to get a pulse, if you will, on how the topic is covered in our general culture. You're not going to popular sources for authority, but you're going there for a pulse. Okay, so that's when to use what type of source. But what about Wikipedia? Ah! Hey, it's okay to use Wikipedia for some basic information. Just remember that it is crowdsourced, right? Anybody gets to edit a Wikipedia page. How credible is that? What about dictionaries? Do you know how many papers I see that start in the opening page? Merriam-Webster defines supply chain as blah blah blah, or um, the Oxford Dictionary defines leadership as blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's take a step back and think for a minute. Dictionaries are there for the general public. They're there to give you a broad sense of what a word means. You are doing an academic program that uses and defines very specific terms relevant to the program and those fields of expertise. You are working at an advanced level. Don't go to the dictionary for a definition. Go to the people in the field that have defined those terms. So if you're working with leadership as a concept, work with how the researchers in that field have defined leadership, not with how Merriam-Webster does. That's like using a popular source to define the scholarly research. No, sure, you need to look up words. Absolutely. I look up words every single day. But in terms of defining key terms in your field of interest, in your subject area, in your academic work, use the definitions defined by those experts. Okay, so here are some tools to evaluate non-peer-reviewed sources. Because of course, if you have a peer-reviewed source, it's already gone through an evaluation process. That's what peer review is. So this is especially for number 3, those popular sources. One tool that people use a lot of is called the SIFT tool, and that's four moves to make when looking at a non-peer-reviewed source. First thing is you want to stop. Then you want to investigate. Then you want to find better coverage. Then you want to trace the original context to where this all started. So that's four moves you can make. I'm gonna introduce you to three, and then we're gonna do an extended example of one of them. If you want to find out more about SIFT, because we're not going to do SIFT, we're actually going to do the third one here. All you have to do is click on the button here, the circle, and it will take you to a wonderful, comprehensive explanation of what to do if you want to do the SIFT technique. Second is the CARS technique, because everything goes by their acronym. This is a checklist that helps you figure out credibility, accuracy, reasonableness, and what support is used in that source. And it gives you questions to interrogate the source with. Same thing. If you want to know more, just click on the maroon circle and it'll take you to a site that really explains how to implement this checklist. We are going to focus on the CRAP test, which has been around since, gosh, for about 11, 12 years now. Originally developed out of Cal State Chico. And I've just found it to be enormously helpful over the years, and so have the students I've worked with. It's the same thing, it's a checklist, right? They're all checklists in a way. And this is a classic one that has you look to determine the currency of a source, the relevance, the authority, the accuracy, and the purpose. You can find out more. We're going to go into it, but you can find out more just clicking on the maroon circle. Okay, so those are three tools to put in your toolbox. We're going to look intensely now at the CRAP test. Okay. And yes, of course, it is kind of funny that it's called a CRAP test. That was intentional in the beginning. Okay, here's the CRAP test. The first thing you look at is currency. So these are the questions you look to answer when reviewing your source. When was the information published or posted? Has the information been revised or updated? Is the information current or out of date? Are the links functional? Relevance. Does the information relate to your topic? Who's the intended audience? Is the information at an appropriate level? And have you looked at a variety of sources? Authority. Who's the author or the publisher or the sponsor or the source? Who wrote this? What are the author's credentials? What are the qualifications to write on the topic? Is there contact information? And what does the URL reveal about the author or the source? If it's a .com, it means something. If it's a .org, it means something. .gov. These are all things you should start to notice. Accuracy. Where does the information come from? Is the information supported by evidence? Can you verify the information in another source, another credible source? Does the language or tone seem to be biased? How so? What about other lots of spelling or grammatical errors on the page? Well, that undermines credibility. And finally, the purpose. What's the purpose of the information? Is it there to inform, to teach, to sell, to entertain, to persuade? Do the authors make their purpose clear? Is the information fact, opinion, propaganda? Does the point of view appear impartial? Are there political, ideological, cultural, religious, institutional, or personal biases? In other words, you're trying to figure out the perspective the piece is coming from. That's the crap test. Now, what we need to do is dive into an example, see how it works out. Okay. So what I did was I just Googled leadership or organizational leadership, I think. And then scrolled down a little bit. And you know what? Look at this. I said, what are the characteristics of a good leader? Hey, I'm writing a paper on organizational leadership. Maybe I need to know what the characteristics of a good leader are. Now, my first mistake, by the way, was not going to the Armacost databases and looking for peer-reviewed sources on leadership, because I'm going to get a much more robust, rigorous set of results. But hey, I decided to go immediately to Google. And this was on the first page. It looked kind of good. Hey, I want to know what the characteristics are. Let's go have a look at this source, shall we? By the way, you can get to this source if you just click on it here. I've made it a live link. Okay. So the first thing is currency. When was it published or posted? Has the information been revised? Is the information current or out of date? Are the links functional? Well, I scrolled down to the bottom of the page when I went there, and if you want, you should bring up that page, this CCL page, on the monitor that you're working with. But I've just have some screenshots here that will help talk us through it a little bit. So one thing I noticed that down at the bottom, the copyright was 2021. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. Okay, that's current. Okay. And when I looked through some of the other things on the page, I found out copyright is 2021. The links worked. Okay, if something's got a lot of dead links, it's not going to be very current, is it? And it means no one's been tending it, no one's been monitoring it. The website design is contemporary, as you can see. It's got this classic, four categories up here. It's clean. The design is kind of very 2020, if you will. And webinars are listed, so they're advertising webinars, and they're listed for 2021. So everything seems to be current. Good. Okay, let's see what else here. Relevance. Does the information relate to your topic? Who's the intended audience? Is the information at an appropriate level? Have you looked at a variety of sources? So I just picked up sort of one of their main areas here on the website. And I noticed characteristics and qualities of a good leader. There they are listed. There's 10 of them. Awesome. I'm excited, right? And here's what I found out when I went through those questions. The information relates. My research is on qualities of leadership. So this is great. I'm excited. The audience appears to be current or prospective leaders, the way they've the way they've talked about organizations. What I did notice, though, is only the topics were provided and maybe brief little tidbits. I couldn't really dig deep. There was no analysis, no deeper insights. I couldn't get to that information if they had it. So I'm a little leery right now. Well, I'm a little frustrated right now. But have I looked at a variety of sources? Well, at this point in my research process, I've only looked at my course textbook, let's say, so I don't really have broad knowledge on the field. So, you know why? Because I went to Google first. I should have gone to Armacost databases and looked up some scholarly sources, but I didn't. Okay, so that's where we are. Let's go to the next one, authority. Who's the author? What's the author's credential? Qualifications? Is there contact information? What does the URL reveal about the author of the source? Okay, well, one thing we know is that it's a .org. You can see that right here, which is, it signals differently than a .com. There's there's a thought there that, oh, well, maybe this isn't just about sales. And I went to their Meet Our Executive team. One thing I did like is that you could actually see their executives, and there were a bunch more. There were about 20 more executives. It seems to be a consultancy firm, and they explain what they do. They're very upfront with that. That's good. They seem to be made up of industry leaders. And this is what I noticed. So the author is the Center for Creative Leadership. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm interested, but anyone can make up a name. So I'm a little hesitant as well. The executive team, I looked through them, and they seem to be comprised of industry leaders in a range of fields. So I'm kind of interested in that. Okay, that's good. Contact information is provided. It's easy to reach them. Good. And the URL, as I said, is a .org. So they're still contending. Maybe they've got some white papers. Maybe they've got some research articles that I can look at. Maybe, they are industry leaders. I'm intrigued. I'm holding off judgment. I'm still going through the crap test. Accuracy. Where does the information come from? Is the information supported by evidence? Can you verify information in another source? Does the language or tone seem biased? And what about errors? Okay, so I went to one of the articles under Insights and Research. And here was one of the articles. Okay, great. So I tried to get to it, and this is what I noticed. Articles are available on the site. They do cite experts in the field, but the articles are mostly introductions to the subject. I would need to purchase the webinar for a deeper dive. Now I'm concerned. I can't get to anything. I've just got this shallow list stuff going on. The tone seems to be for a general business audience. There's no real specialized language. It's all you can do this kind of stuff, rah, rah, rah. It is clearly written. There's no errors, so that's helpful. But I'm getting a little more doubtful as we go on. And purpose. What's the purpose of the information? Do the authors make their purpose clear? Is this fact? Is it opinion? Is there what's the perspective going on here? Well, they want to create a leadership development solution specific to my organizational culture and challenges. And they're going to help me do that. Okay, well, that would be great if I had an organization. Easy to contact. Nice. Those buttons are all over the site. So here's what I found out. The information provided is essentially marketing material. They want to sell me solutions to my organization. And that's fine. More power to them. Yay. But I don't know that that's really helping my academic work in terms of leadership studies. They make their purpose clear, and they're not trying to trick me. They really are. They're making their purpose clear. They're offering multiple opportunities to register for their webinars or for them to create a solution for me. Okay, that's great. They're not trying to trick me, but it might not be what I need right now. And the point of view is really aimed towards solicitation. So we went through the crap test: currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. Given what we've discovered, would I use this site in my paper on organizational leadership? I'd have to say probably not, because I can't get to any of the deep information. I like that they're industry leaders. I like that they're putting together an insights and research tab on their website, but I can't get to anything deep. I can just scratch the surface, and that's not what I need right now. And now I'm remembering that I should have gone to Armacost to find the scholarly research on the field, or at least found some trade and industry publications. So let's do a big recap. What we tried to do was talk about 3 types of sources that you could be using in your work. Scholarly peer-reviewed sources, which are going to give you a lot of return on your investment, but they do take a lot of energy and thought and grinding it out with them. These are tough texts, but they're tough texts because they went through a rigorous process that's producing research in the field. You may run into industry, trade, and government publications, and we're going to go over how to find these resources in Armacost libraries. So don't worry too much about that just yet. I'll show you where to find this stuff. When you're using popular sources, please, please, please run them through one of these tests. We ran through the CRAP test and we found out a site that looked really good ended up being something we might not want to use. So that gives us our introduction to evaluating sources for credibility. I'll see you in the next lecture.